Hi, I'm Casey, but most of you know me around the web as Cartoon12 or Toongal12 here on YouTube, and as my username suggests, I love cartoons. Even as an adult, I still prefer animated movies and shows to live-action ones, and I also like listening to people's opinions about their favorite episodes, so I thought, why not make a few top 10 lists of my own? I'd be interested to hear if anyone agrees or disagrees with my choices and see if people can point out some things that I might not have considered before. So for this top 10 list, I'm going to feature one of my favorite cartoon shows, Rugrats. Created by Arlene Claspy and Gabor Kasupo? Gabor Scupo? And Paul Germain. The series was about a group of babies including headstrong leader Tommy, his little brother Dill, scaredy cat Chucky and his sister Kimmy, the twins Phil and Lil, responsible Susie, and spoiled brat Angelica. Together, this group of best friends went about their day-to-day lives, learning lessons and exploring the world around them. And with a bit of imagination, normal and boring everyday occurrences could be turned into fantastic adventures. Whether you like the series or not, if you were a 90s kid, you couldn't escape it. For close to a decade, this series dominated the airways and was one of Nickelodeon's longest-running shows, as well as one of its most popular ones, and for good reason. Barring some questionable and absent-minded parroting, this show was excellent at getting into the mind of a child and how they interpret the world or blow things out of proportion, or taking serious situations and making them relatable for kids, or how kids can take the mundane and make it fun. It's no wonder this was one of my first fandoms, as it were, the other two being Eureka's Castle and Muppet Babies, but that's a story for another day. Now, I have to confess right now, I haven't seen the series since it went off the air, so I haven't watched an episode in over 15 years.
15 miles!
So this list is going to be just a smidgen different in that, much like the Mysterious Mr. Enter Samurai Jack list, these choices are going to be based more on nostalgia and or how memorable they were to me. And if an episode can be clearly remembered over 15 years later,
15 miles!
it deserves to be on this list. Bear in mind, this isn't necessarily a best of list, it's my own personal favorites list. And whether you agree or disagree with my choices, I'd love to hear your feedback. So without further ado, let's get started. Number 10. Mother's Day. So right off the bat, we start with arguably one of the most heart-wrenching episodes. It's mainly the ending that's a punch to the heart, although there's subtle cues sprinkled throughout that things are about to get serious. Up until this point, it was well established that Chucky was being raised by a single dad, and it was left a mystery as to where his mom was at. Was she dead, divorced, or was just conveniently never seen? According to the creators, they debated back and forth of what to do about her absence, or if they should even bother explaining it at all. So I have to admire them for not taking the easy way out and putting together such a heartfelt episode as each of the babies talk about their moms. It has the usual mischief of the kids and even adults get up to, but interspersed between this, we get a lot of character development for each of the main babies. And when they remember that Chucky doesn't have a mom, they, of course, try to find him one, a plot point that would become the basis for the movie where they go to Paris. But things suddenly get really real when Chucky stumbles upon a box containing his mom's belongings. A box that his dad was trying to hide from him. It's painfully clear he's still dealing with the loss of his wife, and by having to tell his son what happened to her, it becomes a moment of huge growth for both of them. Chucky finally has a personal mystery solved, and his dad finally gains the strength to talk about his loss and move on. It's all encapsulated in a poem Chucky's mom wrote for him, a scene that I'm sure brought everyone to tears, but also assured plenty of kids that losing a parent or loved one isn't their fault, and that you can keep that person alive in your memories. It's a shining moment for a series that knew how to handle difficult subjects with a great amount of respect and heart. Number 9. The Legend of Satchmo.
Satchmo, the trumpet player?
No, the monster!
When trying to compile this list together, this was actually the first episode that came to my mind. The premise, as is with most of these stories, is pretty simple. Grandpa takes the babies on a play camping trip in the backyard, and of course, once it gets dark, their imaginations run away with them when they think that the legendary Sasquatch is out to get them. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I mean Satchmo.
The trumpet player? No, the monster.
There were more than a few episodes that dealt with the babies having to face their fears of the dark, especially with how spooky and different the world can look at night, and Grandpa's stories and Angelica's pranks don't really help. But out of all of them, this is the one that stood out to me the most, and honestly it's because of this one joke that for me is one of my favorites in the whole show. I don't know why it makes me laugh so much, it just does.
Angelica seems to think there's somebody in the neighborhood called Satchmo. The trumpet player? No, the monster.
Number 8. At the movies. Another very early episode, but a memorable one. Again, simple premise, the grown-ups take the babies to the movies, but upon being bored to tears with the Care Bears ripoff, the kids sneak off to try and find the Reptar movie, and completely wreck the theater in the process. I think all of us faced this at some point or another when we were kids, wanting to see a movie that wasn't in your age range, to which you got one of two reactions. You either had the parent who was super strict on what you could watch, or the oblivious parent who didn't realize how mature the movie actually was and or didn't care. What's hilarious is that while the babies are bored to tears, the adults are totally enthralled with this sickeningly sweet movie for 2-year-olds. Everyone except Grandpa, who's able to see how stupid it is. The various movie parodies the kids come across as they try to find Reptar are also pretty funny, which, by the way, this also marks Reptar's first appearance in the series. Yeah, Godzilla's cool and all, but I bet he never got his own ice skating show. Number 7. The Odd Couple. Okay, maybe it's not quite like that. Okay, it's exactly that. When it comes to the main cast, you can't get much more opposite than Tommy and Chucky. One of them doesn't mind being messy, the other hates being messy. One is never afraid, the other is constantly afraid, and yet they're able to complement each other so well, which is why we all loved their friendship. And it's why this episode always stood out to me, because it's one of the first times that their relationship is truly put to the test when Tommy has to stay over Chucky's house for a few days, and very quickly finds out just how different he and his friend really are. It's one thing to hang out with someone for a day, another entirely to have to live with them and have to abide by their house rules. Pretty soon the two are butting heads over everything from what to watch, to what to eat, to what games they should play and how to play them. Even cleaning a room has its own set of rules, and in the end both of them learn a lesson in how to compromise. Tommy learns that whenever you travel to a new place, you can't expect it to be like your own home. You have to follow the rules of said place, while Chucky learns that maybe he should be a little less bossy and strict with said rules.
The police car is at the fire station. The fire truck's at the airport. The airplane's on top of the restaurant. People are hanging out of windows. Buildings are moved. And you've completely taken apart City Hall.
Chucky, in my house, we do stuff like this all the time.
Also, fun fact, to this day, every time I see a triangle, I immediately want to call it a fry-angle. Number 6. The Box. Long before SpongeBob and Patrick played Pretend in a Box, we got this episode, and honestly, it does it much better. Stu's trying to put together a new toy for Tommy, but ironically, the only thing he and his friends are interested in is the box. And as the box gets passed from one kid to the next, it becomes anything and everything imaginable, from a race car to a house to a cave to a rocket ship. I think we can all relate to this episode. Who hasn't had fun playing with a plain old box? And it goes to show just how many uses that one item can have and the power of pure imagination.
Imagination.
Number 5. The Trial.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Or at least the truth of who broke Tommy's clown lamp. This is another episode that I consider a classic. When Tommy's favorite clown lamp gets smashed, the babies decide to stage their own trial to figure out who broke it. This episode always stood out to me since it brings attention to all the main characters and sets up a pretty interesting whodunit. And though it may seem just a bit obvious who broke the lamp, the episode still does a great job of telling each of the kids' stories from their point of view and giving all of them a reasonable motive or an alibi. Angelica was taking a nap in the other room, the twins were playing Ring Around the Rosie around the lamp, and we all know Chucky has always been terrified of clowns, to the point even he admits he hated the lamp and had thoughts about breaking it. So who did it? Well, I won't spoil it, but needless to say, it leads to one of the most satisfying endings in the whole series. Number 4. Candybar Creepshow. Another oldie but goodie. If any of you has seen my Top 13 Halloween Specials video, then you may remember this episode getting a passing mention. And it's a story I still remember clearly since it was included on a VHS tape that I had that had 3 Halloween-themed episodes with the Nicktoons airing at the time, the other 2 being Ren and Stimpy and Doug. And I watched that tape every year on the holiday. What's interesting is that the babies themselves aren't even in costume. They're too young to trick-or-treat yet, so they're stuck in the house and left to wonder what's going on and why all these costume people keep showing up. But their curiosity pays off when they hatch a plan to get as many Reptar bars as they can, and wind up sneaking into the haunted house in the backyard and scaring the pants off of Angelica and Grandpa.
Hey, jump at the house of that real ghost! Not going back in there. No siree.
I thought you said nothing scared you when you were a kid, Pop.
Well, that was now. This is then. Okay, then, which one of you heroes is going in there first?
Number 3. The Mega Diaper Babies. If you guys know me, then you know how much I love superheroes, so I think this episode shouldn't come as a surprise. The babies are watching the the Mega Hyper Heroes cartoon when Angelica decides to steal their action figures, so the babies now have to launch a rescue mission to save their heroes by becoming heroes themselves. Besides the obvious parodies of all things comic booky, I think what I always liked about this one is the powers they decided to give the babies. It would have been so easy to just make them the Fantastic Four or to make Phil and Lil the Wonder Twins or something, but they instead chose to make them all unique. Tommy is basically Beast Boy, Lil is the not-quite invisible dotted line girl, which if you've seen the early Fantastic Four comics, then that's extra hilarious. Phil goes full-on Punisher. Okay, it's technically Spitballs, but come on, they gave a baby a machine gun? How the heck did that get past the censors? And Chucky is, well...
Hey, why do I have to be stinky? Quiet, Chucky. Being stinky's an honor. Well, then why don't you be stinky? 'Cause I'm Chin Baby.
It stinks.
Bottom line, this is a really funny send-up of classic superhero tropes, and hey, at least it was way better than Fan 4 Stick. Number 2. The Inside Story. To any kid who was ever afraid of swallowing a seed and having something growing inside their stomach, I hold this episode responsible for it. After Chucky swallows a watermelon seed and is afraid of it growing inside of him and making him explode, the babies use a lazy beam to shrink themselves down and go inside Chucky's body to get the seed out. While an earlier Muppet Babies episode was far more direct in its parody of the movie Fantastic Voyage, right down to using clips from said movie, this send-up of that film is just as effective and arguably a bit more on the scary side. While Muppet Babies treated the idea as more of a fun adventure with more jokes, this one, at least by Rugrats standards, takes the concept a bit more seriously. Sure, there's some funny moments, but as the babies make their way through Chucky's body, they're clearly not having a super fun time, especially considering their mission is basically to save Chucky from dying. And speaking of which, Angelica, of course, wants to sabotage the mission just so she can watch her neighbor friend go kaboom, which goes to show just how messed up this show could get at times when you think about it. I mean, come on, Angelica actively wants to kill Chucky? Jeez Louise, I think the show was more hardcore than any of us really remember. And my number 1 favorite episode of Rugrats is... Mirrorland. When I was first compiling this list together, there was one episode that immediately came to my mind, the one that I remember the most, the one that I always looked forward to on watching my VHS tapes, the one that I instantly knew was going to be in the number 1 spot. this one. It's funny how most superhero shows have to do that travel to an alternate universe plot, and yet a show about babies and their everyday adventures somehow manages to pull it off as well. Chucky tells his friends that looking at your reflection is actually looking at another realm where everything is a weirder version of this world. So, of course, Tommy plans an adventure there, and of course, thanks to some convenient mishaps going on around the house, he and Chucky truly believe they've traveled to another dimension. I think all of us at some point or another were curious how mirrors worked. Even now, it's easy to imagine there being a whole other world on the other side, and this story plays off that idea perfectly and manages to do some unique things that make it really stand out. When I think of Rugrats, I think of this episode. This one episode encapsulates the show and its themes of kids' imaginations perfectly. It's a clever idea and setup, with Dee Dee coming home with a bunch of knickknacks she bought at an antique store, and between her and Grandpa trying on old clothes and Spike getting tangled in a beard, it's easy to see why the babies would think they've jumped dimensions. It's also a total shake-up of the status quo, because this time around, only Tommy and Chucky go on the adventure, with Phil and Lil staying behind, and even weirder, Tommy takes a back seat and it's Chucky who comes up with the idea for their adventure. How and where he came up with this theory about how mirrors work is never explained. He just randomly whips out this scientific explanation with such confidence as if he's always known it. I think he's been watching too much Space Trek Babies. Well, no matter what the reason, as a kid I totally remember wishing Mirrorland was real. And I still do. The story's left that indelible a memory on me, and it leaves no question as to why it's my pick for my favorite episode. I'm Cartoon12, and I hope you enjoyed the countdown. I'll have more top 10 lists soon, and if you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.
Clink of the y'all at home in the cradle of the toy store, looking for